Whether you're a diehard sports fan, a hopeless romantic, or a comedy aficionado, the Xfinity 10G network was made for streaming it all. Worry less about buffering when streaming your favorite shows, movies, or live sports, and enjoy a better way to watch. Xfinity gives you a reliable connection for streaming, plus all the entertainment you love all in one place. Fear not, because now you can finally sit back, relax, and stream your favorite entertainment and sports like never before with the Xfinity 10G network.
Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 157 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. I may sound a little bit excited, but I'm incredibly depressed at the moment because just yesterday, we're recording this on Monday night, just yesterday, the Duke Blue Devils season ended. Our time with Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, and Cam Reddish, at least, and perhaps some other guys, is over. And that's a really, really sad thing. The Blue Devils fell to Michigan State. Before we get into the discussion about that, I want to bring in my partners in crime. They were both at the game. I, of course, am Jason Evans. I should say who the heck I am. I'm Jason. And my partners in crime are Sam Klein. Sam, back in Durham after a weekend in D.C., right?
Yes, that is right. I was planning to stay over last night in Washington, but had enough sort of manic energy at the end of the game that I got in the car and drove back to Durham. Got back a little after midnight, went back to school this morning. And it was a depressing day on campus. I think everyone was just sort of walking around with sort of a glum mood on. People were like, it was weird because people were on the one hand acknowledging it, obviously. And on the other hand, I think everyone that I encountered today at school was sort of actively trying not to talk about it, while also seeing it on everybody else's face.
That sounds about right. Donald Wine also joining us. Donald is in D.C. all the time. Right, Donald?
Well, when I'm here, and when I'm not here, I'm not in D.C. But I was here yesterday. I was here all weekend. Sam and I got to hang out on Friday a little bit before the game. So we saw each other. And during right before the game started, inside, we were able to hang out for a little bit. But it was great to have Sam up here. It was great to have everybody up. And we'll talk a little bit more about what this town looked like over the weekend. But it's sad that this season's over because we had a lot of great memories from this season, including this past weekend.
So I want to tell folks, before we get into our analysis of the Michigan State game, I want to give folks a little roadmap of what we're going to be going through in this podcast. We'll talk about that game. We're going to talk about the whole season. We're going to look ahead because this past week I got to go to the McDonald's All-American practices, and I interviewed some of the players that will be coming to Duke next season. Really excited just because one season's over. We then immediately begin looking ahead, and then our parting shots are going to be a little unusual. There's some major stuff that we're going to be unpacking toward the end of the podcast. So that's your tease to stick around all the way through everything. And by the way, before we get into all this, we are here because of our sponsors. We want to thank them as we always do. Bird Campbell Law Firm, consistent sponsor throughout the entire year and for a long time here on the DBR podcast. And a little later on, I'll have a special message from Bird Campbell directed toward all of us as we lament the end of the season. And then our other wonderful, wonderful sponsor, GTHC, GTH.com. Go to hell, Carolina, go to hell. From our wonderful friend Kenny Denard. And by the way, as far as we're concerned, you can still use the promo code. The code is DBR. So when you go to GTHCGTH.com to order your gear, you can get 20% off with that promo code. And there's never been a better time to buy those Sights on 6 t-shirts, because just because we lost now, it doesn't mean we don't still have our sights set on title number 6. We just have to delay, just delay a little tiny bit. All right, guys. So
wait, is that a ploy by Kenny? Was Kenny rooting against Duke in these games to keep selling those shirts?
There's a 0% chance of that, and I think he would have sold more shirts had we won.
Yeah, probably.
And everybody would get a Sights on 6 shirt. But anyway, on to the game. The Blue Devils fall to Michigan State. 68-67. Tom Izzo gets his second career win against Coach K. Oh, gentlemen, it was it was a frustrating game because you're playing a great opponent. I mean, look, when the brackets came out, everyone was a little surprised that Michigan State wasn't a number one seed, but there's no reason you're playing a Elite Eight game. You're going to play a great team. That's the way it works. You can't complain about your draw at that point. And I really think the story of the game was turnovers, but I'll get into that in a little bit. I want you guys to unpack what happened to Duke in this game, that we came out on the wrong end of the score. And Sam, I'll start with you. You want to take offense? You want to take defense? Where do you want to go, my friend? Because there's just a lot to talk about.
So I think the place I want to start is in the first half, where Duke built a lot of momentum about halfway through the first half. They got out to, I think the lead climbed to like 9 at one point.
30-21. 30-21. It was 9 points.
It felt like Duke had sort of all the momentum. The building was in Duke's favor at that point. The Duke fans were pretty loud. The Michigan State fans were pretty quiet. The remaining fans, I don't know who they were cheering for, but it felt like Duke had an opportunity there to sort of pull away and keep Michigan State at arm's length for the rest of the contest. And then Michigan State, because they have a lot of talented guys themselves. Cassius Winston had an excellent game shooting the ball, but also distributing. They got right back into it and managed to. I don't know if they tied it up from Duke having 30 or just that they got it close again, but from there was sort of a doubt all the way through that Duke may have blown their chance, just sort of on the momentum, kind of looking more granular at this game.
Hey, Sam,
Duke
Sam,
offense,
Sam, really quick. Duke went 6 minutes when Duke got to 30, they then went 6 minutes without scoring. It stretched to the end of the first half and into the first minute and a half or so of the second half.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, State took the lead from there. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they took the lead at halftime. And by the way, Zion Williamson picked up his second foul, and I'm one of those folks with my hand raised saying that is where the momentum went away.
And so I did want to kind of talk about the Duke offense, because we've talked a lot this year about how Duke hasn't exactly figured out a workable offensive rhythm that's sort of repeatable. There's a lot of give the ball to Zion and RJ and let them get as close to the hoop as they can. And those guys are probably two of the best finishers that we have ever seen at Duke. So there's an argument that that's a totally fine offensive system. It's not elegant. It's not the way that Coach K has normally coached teams, but it led to two players averaging over 22 points a game for this team, and this team at full strength winning almost all of their games. The only teams they lost to were a number one seed and a team that ended up in the Final Four. So from that perspective, the offense kind of worked. On the other hand, there were a lot of problems with that game plan when other teams were able to body Duke up. And we said Michigan State's got one of the strongest front courts in the country. They've got not just the starters, but multiple bigs off the bench who can match Barrett and Zion size-wise, or at least don't get pushed out of the way when those guys are coming at them. And we saw it there on Sunday night. The referees were sort of letting them play, and that's not a recipe for success for Duke, where the ball's inside a lot and Duke's not getting the foul calls, such that at the end of the game, Duke was trying to foul Michigan State to draw free throws, and they ran out of time because they hadn't committed enough fouls yet.
By the way, by let them play, you mean the refs were letting Michigan State hold, grab, push.
Oh, I think they were
egregious.
Doing it, I think they were doing it. The referees were at least being consistent. I think that Michigan
consistently
State was also,
awful.
Well,
consistently awful.
It's not the way I would have refereed the game, but at least they weren't calling fouls on anyone. It was sort of just like, look, they're like, if there's a lot of contact, like with guys going vertical and people going for the ball, they're just not going to call a lot of fouls. That obviously plays into Michigan State's mindset, but Duke didn't have an answer for that. And that was one of the challenges we saw this year. And, you know, if Duke had developed more of a perimeter presence, then they could have they could have called a timeout, and Coach K could have said, all right, no more running the ball into the hole and seeing what happens because we can't get the foul shots. Let's change it up. And that never happened this year. Duke didn't have a safety valve for that. So that, I think, was my big takeaway, was Duke's inability on offense to adjust to the game situation and deal with it the way that it was. And ultimately, that's what I think was the key for Michigan State winning this game and moving on to the Final Four.
So I think the key, I mentioned this before, is the turnovers. The story of the game was that Michigan State did not turn the ball over at all, only 7 turnovers, and Duke had 17, many of which were just careless and just awful, the worst kind of turnovers. Think about this. On the opening possession of the game, the very first time Duke touches the ball, we threw the ball to Javin DeLaurier, and he wasn't looking. The ball literally hit him on the head, and it led to an easy fast break dunk for Michigan State, 2 automatic points, and the final margin was 1 point. I mean, I'm not going to go ahead and say, hey, take away that one stupid mistake where we threw the ball at Javin's head and we win the game. But in a game that was a 1-point game, we gave away the opening bucket to Michigan State for absolutely nothing. And the crazy thing is, we talked about this in the pregame. We talked about this when we were previewing this contest. Michigan State is typically a team that turns it over a lot. We are typically a team that usually forces a lot of turnovers. Instead, this game was our second worst performance of the year in terms of turnover rate. The only game worse than this for Duke in terms of the rate of, how often we turned the other team over was the first time we played Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech. And it was our second worst game in terms of our own turnover rate. The only time we turned the ball over more than this was against Syracuse in the ACC tourney. So that funnels into my favorite stat. Gentlemen, what is my favorite stat?
Oh, the field goal attempts.
Field goal attempts, which incorporates offensive rebounds and turnovers. Michigan State took 70 field goal attempts. They took 70 shots. Duke took 57. We had to overcome a 13 field goal attempt difference to win this game. The only way you can do that is to shoot lights out, and we didn't. We only hit 52% of our 2-point field goals. We're usually closer to 60. And because we were like 5 to 7 points below our average on our field goal attempts, on our 2-point field goal percentage, that would have translated into 1 to 2 more field goals. My kingdom, gentlemen, for 1 more field goal. 1 more field goal, and Duke is still playing. Donald, let me get over to you. I know you want to talk a little bit about fast breaks. God, we got nothing. We got nothing from them in terms of easy buckets, did we?
You're absolutely right. We got exactly that, 0 fast break points. They had 15. And in a year that we, were priding ourselves on our tempo and how many times we got out on transition to get easy dunks or layups or even 3-pointers on occasion, we got 0 points from our fast break. And that was a backbreaker because that's our bread and butter. I talked in the pregame about rebounding and how we had to really out-rebound Michigan State to have a chance to win this ball game. We actually out-rebounded them by 11 on the glass. We had more offensive rebounds. We had more defensive rebounds. But when you have 17 turnovers that lead to 24 points for Michigan State, they had 15 fast break points. We had 0. We were negligible in second chance points, and they outscored us in the paint. So you're talking about some of the things that we have done well all year just did not show up for us. And I know it's easy to talk about the free throws and how we missed a couple down the stretch, including one at the very end that would have tied the game. We were 8 for 13, which is right about where, just a little bit shy of where we normally are. Michigan State was 2 for 6. We actually made more free throws than they attempted. And that's where you want to be when you're talking about going to the line. At the end of the day, like you said, they had chances to make plays down the stretch, and Michigan State did it, and we did not. And that's why they're going to the Final Four.
Hey, Sam, can I ask you? I want to ask about the final few possessions and RJ Barrett, because there are a number of narratives coming out of this game. And one of them is I can't even tell you how many times I've seen sports journalists retweet this one guy, I forget who it is, who had a tweet out there where he said, in Duke's losses this season, I forget the exact numbers, but something
Barrett
like in the final.
RJ Barrett takes all the shots pretty much at the end of these losses.
Yeah, Zion had took one shot in Duke's in the games that Duke lost in the final minute of games that Duke lost that he was at, and RJ Barrett took like 9 or 10 or something like that, and he was something like 1 of 9 or something like that. And so there's this whole narrative that that RJ, I don't know that RJ was a ball hog. I don't know. I don't want to. I think it's wrong. I actually think what I saw in this game especially was Michigan State was doing an incredible job of shading and doubling and even tripling on Zion. When Zion got the ball, there were 3 guys in his way. Now, Zion is a freak of nature, and 3 guys is sometimes not even enough to stop him. But Michigan State did an incredible – I've never seen a team stop us from getting the ball in the post to Zion the way they did. So, Sam, let me put it to you. What were you seeing at the end? Because we got to talk about the final couple of possessions and what happened.
Yeah, I think that Duke fans will probably take a long time from now to finish litigating whether RJ Barrett was the player that deserved to be taking all of those shots at the end of the game. The fact is that he is really good at getting in the lane and getting a bucket, and he can get buckets from angles that most guys can't even dream of. He's got all that body control. He has all the touch, all the feel to take those shots. But at the same time, the team has to understand that there are multiple ways for them to score. And I think that stat, Jason, that you were mentioning that has sort of been around the internet every time Duke has had one of these close losses is telling. Perhaps it's telling of RJ Barrett, and perhaps it's telling of the coaching staff that they're not designing something that is going to be more effective. One of Duke's biggest highlights from this season is Cam Reddish making the 3-pointer against Florida State to win the game on the road. That is,
and the 3-pointer against Louisville,
and the 3-pointer against Louisville.
Between the legs 3-pointer. Yeah,
those are 2 of the biggest highlights for Duke this season, and they don't involve RJ Barrett driving at the hole. And that's not to mention even that Barrett has been an excellent passer, especially during this NCAA tournament. He was able to find guys in a lot of different places when the defense was collapsing around him. So I think it's surprising that he ended up taking these shots. I don't perceive him to be this ball hog. Like I said, we'll argue about this a lot. I don't think that is the case for RJ Barrett. He scored a lot of points this year, and he's really good at it. It's not like he's a bad. It's not like he's a bad scorer. So want him.
He's the second leading scorer in Duke history.
Right, on a single season basis.
In a single season, yeah.
And Duke's had a lot of awesome players. Like a lot of great scorers have come through Duke. So
he's the greatest. He's the greatest ACC scorer among any freshman ever. Period. End of story.
So I think that what I'm getting to here is that I think it's a little bit more on the coaching staff than it is on RJ Barrett. If RJ Barrett's in a position to score, he has learned all his life to score, and the coaching staff knows that, and they sort of have to limit that inclination of his if they want Duke to have multiple chances at the hoop. And I'm surprised that it came down to this for Duke, especially as good as Zion was playing in this game and in previous games. Zion was in the process of taking his offensive game to another level, especially because he was hitting all those 3-pointers. So teams didn't know whether to sag off of him or double him, behind the 3-point line, double him down low, triple him down low. Michigan State, as you said, Michigan State was often sending 3 guys at him just to smother him. So I think it was that Duke wasn't really prepared for that. And honestly, I think it's on the coaching staff that it didn't seem like Duke had a plan when these games got tight, especially against a team as talented as Michigan State.
And especially in this, if you think about how many close games we had in the ACC tournament, in the NCAA tournament throughout the year, we had plenty of experience at these late game situations. And I think that's kind of where the frustration comes, is that in all of those areas, we had a couple, you have the couple Cam Reddish plays. You even have against UCF where it was a rebound by RJ Barrett that went in, an offensive rebound that went in. But for the most part, you saw the same play over and over, which is RJ going to the rack. And teams figure that out. And when teams figure that out, there was no way there should have been a secondary play or a secondary option, and there just wasn't one. I think that's where the frustration lies.
So I feel like the story of the season, again and again and again, in games where Duke would struggle and in games where we were successful, the story was always, could we find someone to complement RJ and Zion? Because those two guys were pretty consistently great, especially on the offensive end. And, while Javin DeLaurier, we should mention Javin had a double-double in this game, I thought. Mm-hmm. And Javin was one of the major reasons we won that rebounding battle that you talked about, Donald. That was so, so important. Javin was 5 of 5 from the field. So Javin had a really nice game, but he's not creating anything. Literally every single point that Javin DeLaurier gets is because someone else got it for him. Not to, he's got to finish, and that's great, but Javin's not creating anything. So the problem that Duke had all season long was finding that complementary piece on offense to RJ and Zion. And a lot of time, either Trey or Cam would step up. And unfortunately, in this game, neither one of them did. They combined to shoot 4 of 13. They combined to only score 12 points. And, Jack White missed a couple threes. Alex O'Connell, Marquise Bolden. We just didn't get anything else from anybody else. So it was RJ and Zion, and really there was nothing else there. Cam had a little run in the first half, but there was just nothing else there. And I think that was an absolute killer for Duke. And then the last thing, and I hate to even go there. We talked a little bit about the refs. I wanted to point out one thing about the referees. It wasn't just that they refused to call the many, many times that Zion and RJ were just brutally mugged, or when they were shooting, or the times that Zion was held over and over again. Their videos, again, on Twitter, you can find them very easily, of Zion Williamson being held every time he tried. Like, it wasn't just that they held him to keep him from getting to a spot. They were holding him to keep him from jumping over them and grab balls. That's why a lot of the turnovers that happened when we were trying to feed Zion in the post were feeding him high, and the Michigan State guys literally grab onto his shirt and hold him down so that Zion can't go up and get the ball. And the refs never called it a single time. Never called it. But the thing I wanted to say about the referees that I think a lot of people may have missed in this game, it wasn't just when Duke was on offense. It was also when Michigan State was on offense. And Cassius Winston, great player, clearly the most outstanding player in this game, and an All-American, and deserves all the accolades. Cassius Winston, when he faced Trey Jones, figured out very early on that he could push Trey Jones away as a way of getting to the hoop. And he did it again and again and again. And I was literally throwing stuff at the television in the second half when Cassius Winston would start to drive into the lane. He would extend his arm and push Trey Jones away from him, and that would create the space he needed to do what he wanted. And the refs just consistently refused to do anything about it. And it's so frustrating, because it's not that you expect to get every call, but you expect the game to be officiated the way a normal game is officiated. And this one wasn't. I mean, the point about the lack of fouls that Duke had at the end, where we needed to commit fouls to put them on the line, there's no other game in the NCAA tournament that was like that, where neither team was in the bonus at the end of the game, because the refs had swallowed their whistles the entire second half. And
Jason, the challenge, though, is that Duke had to recognize that was the case a lot earlier in the game and adjust to it. You can't switch the refs out during the game. What you can do is recognize that they're not calling it and change the game plan so that you're not throwing the ball inside every time for what previously were what would normally be high percentage plays by having the ball inside and drawing fouls in addition to getting the layups. When you realize that's not going to be a thing, you got to adjust and you got to do something else. And they didn't do that. They didn't recognize it, and they didn't recognize it until it was too late. It was almost embarrassing that Duke was intentionally fouling when they only had 3 fouls on the board with 8 seconds left in the game. It's like, was no one paying attention to this being the case? Nobody was really in foul trouble. Zion got his 3rd foul, but I don't think anybody got 4 fouls for Duke. They had to recognize this was the reality. I think that says something about the team's attentiveness on, to what was going on and not being able to adjust.
Actually, it says something about experience. You're talking about the guys having to recognize what's happening and adjust to it. I think that's an experience thing, but we're going to table that for the moment. We're going to get to the experience factor later on because we have a long conversation we're going to have about it. Donald, I'll give you final word. Wrap up the conversation here.
I just went to really quickly about the refs. We talked about kind of how inconsistent they were with and what they let go. Two of those refs, Keith Kimball and Doug Sermons, were selected to go to the Final Four. So that should tell you that the NCAA also saw they saw what everyone else saw, and they said, well done, lads. So I'm not, I don't know what to tell you other than what we're seeing is apparently what is allowing some of these refs to continue on in the tournament. Keith Kimball, by the way, will have reffed 107 games when he steps onto the court for the Final Four on Saturday. It is by far the most a referee has ever done in one season of college basketball.
Man, that's some good stuff, Donald. Way to go.
I read. I had a lot of reading today.
So this episode of the DBR podcast is brought to you by our two wonderful sponsors. We mentioned them at the top of the podcast, GTHCGTH.com, Kenny Denard's outfit, where they have all your Go to Hell Carolina gear, and they still have those Sights on 6 t-shirts. And like we said at the top, use that promo code DBR if you want to get 20% off your first order there at GTHCGTH.com. And also Bird Campbell. And I every so often we get this, and it's really nice and wonderful when we do. Tucker Bird of Bird Campbell wrote us a little note, his thoughts on the season. I want to read it to all of you now. He said, "This year provided a ride like no other. This team's motto, earn everything, seems ironic in retrospect because the world put such lofty expectations on the team regarding anything less than a national championship as a failure. The team, it seemed, had everything to lose, yet gamely took on all comers. In truth, this was a magical bunch," he says. "A fun-loving, high-flying show that had fans cheering and even the occasional Tar Heel applauding. They represented all that makes Duke, well, Duke. In the end, we loved them not because they were perfect. They were perfect simply because we loved them." Great words there from Tucker Bird of Bird Campbell. And a reminder, if you are in Texas or Florida and you have legal needs, reach out to them at birdcampbell.com, BYRDCAMPBELL.com. And again, guys, thanks for sponsoring the DBR podcast. So in just a moment, we're going to get to looking ahead to the future of Duke basketball. But before we do, we have to look back all the way to the beginning of the season. Sam does this every year. We play our stats game where we try and do predictions. I know that there are some truly terrible predictions this year, maybe even one that rivals Donald predicting that Duke would score 100 points 10 different times a couple years ago. And I think that year we only ended up scoring 100 like once or twice. I think I have one this year that is just as ignominiously bad. But Sam, this is your baby. This is your ball. Tell us all how the stats game went this year. Who did smart things and who did stupid things?
So, Jason, you have a good handle, at least on the fact that you have probably the dumbest prediction.
Thank you.
But you're also coming away with a runaway victory overall in this game, and I'll tell you how it happened. So, like you said, we've been doing the stats prediction game for a couple of years. I think it's not the most perfect way to preview a season, but it is sort of a fun way for us to try to figure out where we're at the beginning of the year, and then take a look back at the end of the year. So I think what was interesting this year is that we had seen Zion in the Canada games, but we didn't. I don't think we still knew exactly what this team was going to look like. I think we still expected RJ Barrett to be by far the alpha of this team, and for Zion to sort of be the side man. I don't think that's how it turned out. I think we expected Cam Reddish to be a lot more of a factor on this team than he ended up being. So let me just run through some of these. We all predicted that RJ Barrett was going to score the most points on the team, which he did, 860, as Jason mentioned, the second second biggest scoring season in Duke history, which is incredible. But RJ and Zion basically averaged the exact same points per game. It's just that Zion was hurt for 5 more games than RJ was. So that was the entire difference between their scoring output. On the rebounds front, we all predicted that Zion was going to have the most. He ended up with 293, which is also an incredible number. On the block shots, this was interesting, actually. Zion only ended up winning the total block shots by 1. He had 59 block shots on the season, and Marquise Bolden had 58. And Donald had picked Marquise Bolden. Jason and I picked Zion Williamson. So Zion took that one. Assists, we all picked Trey Jones. That one wasn't especially interesting. Jones had 192 assists on the year. RJ Barrett, surprisingly good assist man with 164, but still well behind Duke's starting point guard. Here was the first interesting one that we did not see coming, which was most steals. Zion Williamson led the team in steals with 70. Trey Jones was right behind him with 68. Nobody got points here from our group because 2 of us picked RJ Barrett and Jason picked Trey Jones. So I don't know why we thought that RJ Barrett was going to lead the team in steals. I don't know what Donald, what were you thinking there?
I was thinking, sorry, Zion. Sorry, man.
Yeah.
That's my bad.
hey,
that's all I
don't
can
get
say.
credit for closest without missing.
You
Trey
still
Jones was right there. I should
worry.
get some credit.
Don't worry, you still win even without it. So to spoil the non-exciting ending of this game this year, here was another good one that Jason gets a point for, and that I'm kind of just annoyed by, is highest field goal percentage, minimum 1 field goal per game. That was Javin DeLaurier, which Jason predicted. Zion Williamson came in at 68% from the field for the season, which, given his volume, is just nuts.
Yeah.
I somehow predicted RJ Barrett, which was incredibly stupid. But Jason got a point for that because he picked Javin DeLaurier, which was a good pick. Javin DeLaurier.
Did I have someone stupid, or did you pick
you
Zion?
you had Zion.
Okay. All right.
So not a stupid pick. But Javin DeLaurier, another one who had sort of a weird season offensively, because he ended up actually being pretty efficient when he had the ball. He almost never has the ball in his hands. So that was an interesting one. Highest 3-point percentage, we all predicted Alex O'Connell. It was Alex O'Connell, although let's not dwell any longer on Duke's 3-point shooting ability from this season, because it wasn't all that thrilling. Total number of 3-pointers, I had predicted RJ Barrett. The 2 of you predicted Cam Reddish, which it was actually going away. Cam hit 89 threes on the season. Total number of wins, we were we were trying to I was trying to temper expectations and saying that Duke would only win 28 games. Donald was going nuts and said that Duke would win 36. Jason only missed it by 1. So Jason had 33. Duke ended up with 32 wins this season, which is still a pretty damn good year.
I really wish Donald had won.
Yeah, me too.
Yes. Yeah, I obviously wish Donald had won, but
3 more victories would be very, very nice.
Yes, exactly. True road wins, Duke ended up with 7. I predicted 5. The 2 of you said 6. This was kind of a tough one to pin down. Again, I was just looking back. It appears that I was a lot less confident in this team than you guys were, and the team sort of ended up splitting the difference because they came through on the talent. They did not come through on health, which was sort of the recurring theme all through the season.
Are you counting beating UNC and Charlotte and Virginia Tech and DC? Because I would count those.
Ooh, that's a good. That's a good point.
I know. Those are both neutral.
No.
Yeah,
they're not.
But no, ACC teams in the tournament, there only ended up being 7. Did I get that right? There are 7 ACC teams in the tournament.
Yeah, it's an outrage, by the way.
Which is what Donald predicted. Which is what Donald predicted at the beginning of the season. So Donald got a point for that.
Nice.
Total Zion Williamson slam dunks. For some reason,
we were all over.
We all thought Zion was going to have 100 slam dunks, and he ended up with like 60 some. I didn't get the exact number, but I checked on the dunk thread on the DBR forum, and the last update was somewhere in the 60s. So Zion ended up with something around 60 or 70 dunks on the season. I don't know why we all thought he was going to get 100. That's a lot, even with the injuries.
Because we saw against Canada, he like dunked like 15 times in one game.
Yeah, but that's Canada. Like,
also, what were we? Didn't Bagley have like 90, and we figured that he would basically break that record?
Yeah, Bagley had like 103 or 104, I think.
Yeah, and we thought but I think honestly, we were thinking that he he would dunk more than he did. And that's kind of testament to how Zion really took off this year, is that he, as we've said many, many times, he's not just a dunker. We learned that this year.
And right, we saw him have a lot of layups that probably could have ended up being dunks that were just easier to get points off of because he was able to lay them in sort of artfully as opposed to going for the dunk, which I guess speaks to that same point. Now we're coming up on the one that I performed the best at, which is Jack White's total minutes. Jack White ended up with 716 minutes on the season. I predicted 401, and I had the highest number. So none of us knew the extent to which Jack White was going to be a factor on this team.
I think you had won that one by Christmas.
Yes, something around there.
Was it that late?
So
yeah,
I was feeling, especially because Jack White sort of fell off during ACC season, as everyone remembers. But so I came closest on that. So I'm getting myself a point for that one. How many 100?
Wait, you didn't have to get that exact. Wait, you didn't have to get that exact? How do you get it?
I didn't have to get. I would have won the game if I had gotten it exact.
Yeah, that'd be bingo.
Yeah, really.
I would have given myself the victory there. How many 100-point games was Duke gonna score this season? I had 1. Donald had 5. Jason had 4. The real number was 3. Obviously, the highlight of the season ended up being that Kentucky game, which was the very first game of the year where Duke scored like 130 points and looked like they were never going to lose again. But yeah, they only ended up scoring 103 times.
If we'd done this contest after that game, I definitely would have said 10.
Yeah, no. Well, I don't know if you would have picked 10. No one's that stupid. But
yeah, someone is.
Yeah, well, look, we learn, we get better every year, and we get smarter. And Duke brings in a whole new class, and then we forget everything we know. That's sort of part of the fun of being us, right?
Exactly.
How many individual 30-point games was Duke going to have this season? I went high on this and said 14. Donald said 6. Jason had 12, and it was 11. I went back and counted those up. So that was a good job on Jason's part, although there were a number of games where guys had 27, 28, 29 and got close. Cam Reddish's high for the season was 27. But Zion had 6 of these games. RJ had 5. And so that there you go. It was 11 30-point games. Here's the we're now coming to, of course, the most fun category, which was Marquise Bolden total 3-pointer. Recap. I predicted that Marquise Bolden would hit 2 3-pointers. Donald predicted that Marquise Bolden would hit 4 3-pointers. Jason Evans predicted that Marquise Bolden would hit 12 3-point field goals this season.
No, wait, folks, how many did he hit?
Folks, Marquise Bolden was 0 for this. He didn't hit a single 3. He did take a couple, but he didn't make a single one.
He was 0 for 7.
He was 0 for 7.
And I think if he'd just hit a couple of those, like if he'd hit like 2 or 3 of his first 7, he would have ended up taking enough to make my 12 happen.
I don't even know if that's true. I am not sure that that's true.
As the owner of what we thought was the stupidest prediction on record, I would like to point out that when I said that we were going a couple years ago that we would have 10 100-point games, we actually got 1 or 2. So I'm just saying, Jason, I said 12. He didn't even attempt 12 3-pointers.
So he's on the Marquise Bolden is on the Plumlee plan, not the Wendell Carter plan.
Correct.
And I think I've made reference this season a couple times to Marquise Bolden sort of low key actually just being another Plumlee brother. He's basically got the same game, like bodies up on defense, isn't all that comfortable on defense on the perimeter, definitely, but has clearly worked on a handful of post moves that are effective if he has time and space to execute them. So Marquise Bolden, it turns out Marquise also an M name, so maybe he is actually a Plumlee brother in disguise. And then finally, the last stat that actually this was an interesting one. Combined points per game for Zion and RJ combined. The real number ended up being 45.2. Jason just barely beats out Donald on this one. Jason had 44, so he was off by 1.2. Donald had 46.5, so he was off by 1.3.
Oh, and get out of here.
I made sure not just to check it on on the basketball reference page, but I also went and actually like did the calculation to make sure that it didn't come out different when you added them up. I did bother to check if Zion had busted through his shoe in warmups against UNC instead of in the first minute.
Yep.
I was just going to say this.
Donald would have taken
won.
Yep.
He dropped 2 points per game with that in that game.
That's right.
Yep.
He almost 2 points per game was lost as a result of him blowing out in that first minute. So
if he had done it 4 seconds earlier, it would have kind of 0 point.
Right. He did not. I was curious. He did not register a trillion for that game because he did technically have a turnover as a result of the incident. So he registered a 1 trillion. It was a trillion and 10. It was a trillion and 10.
Okay.
For Zion Williamson in the home game against Carolina. So the final score of the game, basically, if it was an instance where there was a number to predict, the person who got closest gets it. If it was an instance where you had to pick the name of the guy, you had to obviously get the guy right. You couldn't just get like the guy who's closest to him alphabetically or something. And you got a point if you picked the right guy, no matter how many guys picked you. But nobody got points if everybody just picked the same thing, because that's not fun. So Jason ended up with 8. I ended up with 4, and Donald got 3. So Donald, you and I have to just do better next year, man.
See, what happened was the way my bank account's set up, there's a checking and a savings. And at the time when we did this, my savings was kind of messed up, so I couldn't transfer from checking and savings. And I made some stupid picks.
Yeah, look, we all make these mistakes. I'll relate this.
I had 8 points and you guys combined for 7 points. So
That's
does that mean I'm smarter than both of you combined?
Didn't
I'm
you
smarter
say
than both of you combined.
Didn't you say if all of us got it, then none of us got points?
Right.
So we had a lot of those.
I removed a lot of the redundant points.
Yeah. I'm smarter than both of you combined.
No. That's not how it works. And look, whatever this proves, we'll come back next year and we'll do it all again, and we'll prove that once again we don't know anything. And next year will be even more fun because we'll know even less about the team than we did this year, because we're going to return just as little in terms of production and have new guys that aren't supposed to be dominant. So, man, stay tuned for DBR podcast episodes or season 6, where we know nothing, like even less than
we won't even have the Canada. We won't even have the Canada.
Right, exactly. We don't even have those freebies at the beginning.
We should get an actual trophy, and it should be like, I don't know, a basketball or something, maybe even like a headphone or a microphone. And just have a little one that we trade from year to year. Really is just going to stay at Jason's house until either Sam or I win.
If somebody wants to sponsor the DBR podcast stacked prediction game trophy, email us at dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We'll name it for you. Like if your name was like Jimmy, we could call it the Jimmy.
Yeah.
And we could pass it around. I'd be into that. I would facilitate it if you wanted to pay for it. Because I think that'd be a lot of fun. Anyway, I'll check in with you guys again in October for the next edition of the Stats Game. But thank you both for playing again this year, and we'll do it again sometime soon.
It's always a lot of fun.
Champion. I'm the champion. How many years in a row have I won? This is like 7 years in a row, I think. Or 8?
No. I won last year.
You haven't been around 7 years.
This is only the 5th season we've done this. Congratulations, Jason. We're all very proud of you, and we.
I'm just waiting for an actual trophy so I can start winning. Once I have something tangible.
Was there something on the line?
Yeah, something on the line. Then I'll do it.
Next year, it's going to be the all Justin Robinson version. We're just going to predict Justin Robinson stats for his redshirt senior season. So I hope you guys are ready to do some research. I did read the other day that Justin Robinson is. There was an article about him, I think, either on SB Nation or on The Athletic somewhere, that he is. I guess he's a redshirt junior, so he's got another year of eligibility, and he's interested in getting a business degree. So he might be my classmate next year. Over at the business school. So I'm looking forward to that.
There you go.
Thanks for doing it, Sam. Thanks for compiling it, and thanks for allowing me to win.
And this is my request to Basketball Reference. Please track dunks. That would make your site a lot more fun.
All right, gentlemen, it's time for us to look ahead a little bit. Time for us to start thinking about the 2019-2020 Duke Blue Devils. And to do that, toward that end, I got to do something very special this past week. I got to go to the McDonald's All-American practices and also to Media Day. I got to see the guys that Duke already has signed and the ones that we're hoping to sign. And at Media Day, I got to speak to some of these guys. So before we get to my analysis of what I saw at practice and what I saw at the McDonald's All-American game when I watched it, I want to let all of you have a listen to some of the interviews that I did with these guys at Media Day. I spoke to the two Duke recruits who have signed for next year, Wendell Moore and Vernon Carey. And I also spoke to two guys who are McDonald's All-Americans who are uncommitted that Duke is looking to sign, Matthew Hurt and Trendon Watford. Matthew Hurt is sort of the most high-profile guy, but Trendon Watford is a guy who just very recently came onto Duke's radar. So I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to let you all listen to my interviews with those guys, and then we'll come talk about them a little bit, and I'll tell you what I saw when I got to see them play. All right, so I'm here with Vernon Carey. Vernon, bad news. You're not able to play this week. Hurt your ankle. Tell folks a little bit about that.
3 weeks ago, I sprained my ankle coming down, landing on someone in the regional state semis or something like that. And yeah, I've just been rehabbing ever since, and hopefully I'll be ready for next week for Geico's. That's the plan right now.
And so we're not going to get to see you play this week, but you've got to see other guys play. Tell me a little bit, first of all, the guy sitting right next to you, your future teammate, Wendell Moore, tell me what you think of his game.
Versatile, finds teammates, makes people around him better, just a great leader.
Hey, let's talk about your Duke recruitment for just a moment. Tell me what it was that ultimately sold you on coming to play for Coach K, or was it Coach K that sold you?
It was kind of both. Coach K just being able to play under his legacy that he has at Duke, and just the guys that come in and just produce for him, and just being able to play with guys like Wendell and Boogie, and hopefully we could get Matthew and Trendon to come. So that's just the plan right now.
Yeah, that'd be a fun five to have. Any interesting stories about your recruitment, about when you visited Duke? Anything that you experienced that you want to share with us that was especially memorable?
I visited when I think it was Countdown to Craziness.
Yeah,
I visited that weekend with Wendell and some other recruits, and I just knew that was the right fit for me. Just being able to play in that environment, it's not like no other. It's one like no other.
Talk about your game for a minute. What do you think you're best at? Because I think most Duke fans haven't had a lot of chances to see you play, or all they see is the YouTube highlights. That's not the real thing. So what are you best at? And then after we do that, tell me what you think you need to work on the most.
Some of my strengths right now is just being able to just use my strength that I have inside, and being able to step out and shoot the shot that they give me. But I feel like right now, something that I can improve on is my defense and just me getting in college shape. I feel like in college shape.
Thanks a lot. We really appreciate it, and good luck next year. And we hope to see you in some of the All-Star games soon.
For sure. Thank you.
All right, with Wendell Moore now. And Wendell, first of all, tell me a little bit about what it's been like this week. You've been playing with some great players. Is that at all intimidating, or how do you think you've held up?
I think I've been doing pretty good. I mean, this is obviously something I'm used to playing on like the UIBL circuit, playing USA basketball. I mean, but this is kind of a different feeling. I mean, it's all 24 great guys.
Have you and Vernon been working at all on the other potential Duke recruits here, Matthew and Trendon?
Yeah, we've been trying to recruit a little bit, but at the same time, we try to give them their space, and allow them to do their own thing. I mean, because like just from my point of view, I wouldn't want somebody always in my face talking about come here. But yeah, we're trying a little bit.
Talk to me a little bit about your Duke recruitment. What was it that eventually sold you on the school? What was it like? You had this is it. I got to go to Duke.
Yeah. I mean, I was just saying like life after basketball for me. I mean, because that brotherhood thing is really real. So, I mean, I was always going to be a part of that.
Did you see the video they put out just last week?
Yeah, it was great.
With all those players, I mean, so many NBA guys in that video. Those are your dreams, I guess, yeah?
Exactly.
So one thing people wonder a little bit about you, you're one of those guys who isn't necessarily an automatic one and done. I'm not saying, I know no one makes decisions or anything like that, but what do you envision your path being in college as you hopefully move on to a very successful pro career?
I mean, obviously I hope to be one and done, but my main focus in college is just to win a national championship while I'm there. I mean, just make our team as good as it can be, and I mean, at the end of the year, we'll figure out what happens.
Fair answer. I wasn't going to make you commit to anything. Don't worry. Hey, talk a little bit about your game. What do you think your strengths are? What are the things that you're going to bring to the table?
I think really for me, I can do a little bit of everything. I know I can play point guard. I can play on the wing. My defensive versatility is really good. And, I mean, I think I'm just like a do-it-all kind of guy.
And the converse to that is, what do you want to work on? What do you feel like this is what I really have to get better at?
For me, I want to become a better leader. Like, I think next year I'm going to be put into a situation where I have to lead a little more than I'm used to doing. So that's just something I want to work on.
So one thing I wonder, I know everyone runs their own race, but if you had to compare yourself to someone, doesn't have to be a Duke guy, it could be someone else, is there anyone that you feel like that guy's game sort of most resembles mine?
Yeah. I mean, if I had to say somebody, I'd probably say somebody like Kawhi Leonard. I mean, because he gets it done on both ends. I mean, he's not the most flashy guy. I mean, but at the end of the night, you're going to know that he was on the floor. He made a huge impact.
That's a great answer. We would not mind if you were another Kawhi Leonard. Well, so thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. Any message to the Duke fans out there as we look forward to next year? We've had a great run this season. I know none of you guys are going to be Zion Williamson, but what's the message to Duke fans for next year?
Hopefully after we get the 6th one this year, me and Vernon can work towards getting the 7th one next year.
I like it. That's the right attitude. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
So we're here now with Matthew Hurt, who is deciding among many different schools. I know you said you're going to make a decision in a few weeks. Is that right?
April 19th, I think.
You think you haven't made up your mind yet, but you know when you're going to make up your mind? Is that how it works?
Yeah. I think I wanted to be around my birthday, and I think April 19th would be the best day.
Perfect. So talk to me a little bit about the different schools you're deciding among and how you're going to make that decision. What are the things that are the pros and cons that make you lean one way or another?
How comfortable I feel with the coaches, teammates next year. Playing style, a little bit of everything. I try to want to fit in with any style. Because I want to show how versatile I am. Those are some big factors.
So you talk about how versatile you are. Give us an assessment of your game. For most of us, all we see are YouTube highlights. Tell us what Matthew Hurt's game really is about.
I can shoot it from 3, mid-range. I try to put the ball on the floor as well. And defensive-wise, try to switch everything. Because that's where the NBA is going, switching everything. Having big men can guard point guards, and having big guys guard big guys as well.
And what are the weaknesses you think you have? What are the things you want to work on?
Getting quicker, getting more explosive, and also getting stronger. I want to guard 4 and 5 in college as well, not just 1, 2, and 3. So just try to get a lot stronger, try to get my handle tighter.
Are you ready for this to be over? You ready to pick a school?
I'm ready, but the coaches didn't overdo it. Just texted me a lot. It was fun to me. I'm just getting to the end of it.
All right, well, good luck, Matthew. You know what school I hope you pick, but good luck to you no matter where you go.
Thank you.
All right, I'm here with Trendon Watford now, and I have to tell you, a few weeks ago when I thought about coming to the media day and talking to the Duke guys who were here, your name wasn't on the list. It sort of came out of nowhere. Talk about that a little bit.
I got the call from Coach Nate James, right before the Final Four game, and he ended up coming to my Final Four game also, but it was great because, Duke's a great school with a great coach, and, I feel like they're a great program.
And have you talked to the Duke guys who are here, Vernon and Wendell?
Oh, yeah, me and Vernon are actually roommates here right now, so we definitely talked about it. We watched the last Duke game together, and Wendell's my next door neighborhood, basically, in the hotel, so I feel like, that's definitely, I don't know who planned that, but it's good on them.
It's like they're trying to tell you something there, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
So talk about your game a little bit, because Duke fans haven't had a lot of chance to scout you and know about you. What are your strengths? What are the things you think that you do out there that are really special?
Oh, I can do a lot of things. I feel like I can pass, dribble, get the ball off the glass and push it, and be able to knock down shots. I feel like I'm one of the most versatile guys in this class, and just with that being said, I feel like, that's what Duke basketball is, a lot of positionless basketball.
Exactly. You've been watching this year's team a lot, I bet, huh?
Yeah, for sure. Great guys.
And talk about your weaknesses, because everybody's got to get better at something to move on.
I feel like I got to keep increasing my three-point ability. It only gets, the line goes back farther in college, so I feel like, got to keep improving that. And, just got to stay more versatile. Got to keep doing a lot of things, and, I feel like that's it.
All right, so just between you and me, I promise I won't tell anybody. Are you going to come to Duke?
I can't tell you. I don't know yet.
I understand. It's fine.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, man. We appreciate it. Good luck no matter where you pick a school, but you know what we're hoping.
All right, thank you.
All right, so folks from McDonald's for pretending like I'm a member of the basketball media and allowing me to go to see this event. It was a lot of fun. It was really cool.
Hey, Jason, we are the basketball media. All right, let's not.
Yeah.
Let's not pull any punches here. We're very serious journalists around here at Duke Basketball Report.
Yeah. So let me start with what I saw, and then guys, I'll get your reactions maybe to what you saw on TV or what you heard in those interviews. Obviously, with Vernon Carey, as you heard from the interview, he was hurt, had a bad ankle, and so I saw nothing from him. He's widely considered one of the top 3 or 4 players in the class, a big man. Who can go inside and out, and everyone says he's really, really skilled for a guy his size. But I can't speak to that because I didn't get to see it. I will tell you that he is a big guy. This is someone who will not be pushed around in the paint, and that's gonna be a good thing for Duke. Wendell Moore, I was just very, very impressed with his quickness and his defensive footwork. I didn't see a lot on offense from him, but when he was on offense, he was looking mostly to facilitate. He didn't look to shoot a lot. He's not an alpha. He's not some guy who's going to come in, and I don't think there's any way he's going to average 15 plus points per game, but he's a great complementary player. He does a ton of things really well. Look, we saw it in the McDonald's All-American game where he got assists, he got steals, he got rebounds. He did bank in a 3-pointer in the McDonald's game, and he has a nice looking stroke, but he's not going to be a volume scorer. He's the kind of kid, I think, who isn't going to really wow you with anything he does, but he's going to do a lot of different things really, really well. And you heard in the interview where he said that his goal is to be one and done. I just don't see him as the type of player who's going to produce enough that he will be one and done. But we'll see. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Matthew Hurt is a kid, another top 5 recruit, just like Vernon Carey, another big man. He's really down to Duke, Kentucky, and Kansas and North Carolina. Most people think it's Duke and Kansas, and most people think he's going to end up coming to Duke. We will find out in just a couple weeks. He has very long arms, really good instincts. I mean, one of the things that I noticed out there, he was making lots of smart decisions. There were other guys, and I noticed this at the practice, there were other guys who were trying to do spectacular but really stupid things, even at practice. These guys are like trying to do crazy stuff. And Matthew Hurt just kept on trying to do the smart play. I kind of like that. I admire that in the kid. He's not a great athlete. He definitely needs to get stronger. He needs to work on finishing through contact in a big, big way. He struggled finishing through contact. He seemed more comfortable on the perimeter than he did inside. But he's clearly a guy who's going to be able to score in bunches from the outside, and is just a really, really skilled ball player for a guy as big and as long as he is. And then the last of them, just really quick on Trendon Watford. This is someone who's just recently got onto Duke's radar. I was very impressed by his motor. He's lost about 20 pounds since the fall. He appears much quicker and more explosive without losing a lot of strength. He's someone, again, who fills up the stat sheet. He had a bunch of rebounds and a bunch of assists in the McDonald's All-American game. He's not enough of a freak athlete to be one and done. Duke's main competition for him is Memphis. And I worry a little bit that he will look at Memphis and see that he could have a larger role there as a freshman than he would at Duke. If he comes to Duke, we've got Jack White and Javon DeLaurier, Marquise Bolden, Joey Baker. There's just a lot of guys who play the same kind of position as Trendon Watford, who are probably going to be at Duke. next year. And I think he would have, not a tiny role, but not a huge role as a freshman. He could have a huge role as a sophomore at Duke. I don't know if he'd be willing to wait that long for it. So anyway, sorry, I was going on, and people who don't care about recruiting are probably fast forwarding or turning us off, and I apologize. Guys, what did you, Sam, what were your thoughts on what you've seen from these guys or what you heard from those interviews?
Yeah, I'm obviously most excited about Vernon Carey and the impact that he's going to make for Duke. I think we are sort of waiting and seeing, especially because we didn't get to see him at the McDonald's game, for sort of what type of big Vernon Carey is going to be. Duke has had a fair amount of success the last couple of years with these one and done big men, looking at Marvin Bagley, Wendell Carter, if you want to consider Zion Williamson a big man. All of them have been different in their own way. So I'm not worried about Vernon Carey being able to plug in the way that a Duke fan might have thought would have been a challenge maybe 8, 10, 12 years ago. So he's definitely going to get a lot of opportunities to be the best offensive version of himself. The question is he going to hit a lot of shots from outside, or is that just talk? Is he going to be taking 3 threes a game, or are we going to expect all of his production to come from the post? And then the other thing that I thought was interesting that he brought up was that he wants to really work on his defense and his conditioning. That sounds like a Jalil Okafor to me more than it does like a Wendell Carter. If we're gonna start picking nits about what's missing from his game. So I hope that his defense and his conditioning gets a lot of work over the summer when he comes into Duke and gets to work with the coaching staff and the strength staff. The other guy that obviously I want to focus on is Wendell Moore, who I only want to I only want to dwell on the guys that are definitely coming now, because these other dudes, as you mentioned, Jason, Matthew Hurt, and Trendon Watford could end up in other schools next year. But Wendell Moore, I thought was interesting that he talked about his sort of life after basketball. So while he's trying to be a one and done player, and we'll see if he's good enough to get to that point, he's picking Duke and is coming to be a part of Duke because he thinks that it brings value to him outside of just that 1 year. So I thought that was really encouraging. It was cool to hear, not just from guys who are definite top 2-3 picks, but guys whose futures are maybe a little less certain, that they sort of understand that the value of being at Duke and playing for Coach K extends well outside the lines of the basketball court.
Hey, Donald. So Trendon Watford doesn't even have a Duke offer yet. Are you surprised that he has Duke as one of his top 5? He hasn't even visited the campus yet, and he says we're one of his finalists. And a lot of people think, we have a decent chance at him.
I'm not surprised in the sense that this kind of happens from time to time with recruits, where they have their choice of teams, and maybe one team hasn't shown interest yet, or at least officially, and they end up doing it anyway. But it is kind of interesting. I think one of the best parts of the interviews that you had, which were all good, was about him saying that he was rooming with Vernon Carey and is next to Wendell Moore. So literally he was surrounded by the Duke recruits, and that, they were talking about how he was saying that, they're always talking to him about Duke, but not pressuring him. So I think that is an interesting thing that, that sort of aligns itself. And when he does eventually come to campus, or if he makes that trip, I think that he will get an offer, and I think we have a really good shot at him. But I like watching the McDonald's All-American game, because you get to see how these players, you get a little sense of how how next year's landscape of college basketball is kind of going to look, because, over the last few years, it has been dominated by these, some talented freshmen, and you want to see who those talented freshmen are coming in and how they can complement those teams. And we're no exception. We're usually going to have 1 or 2 or more McDonald's All-Americans coming through the program. And I think that, it'll be interesting to see how Carey works his way in, but I think both him and Moore have a great chance of working at some things and really being pieces to a puzzle next year that are still yet to be completed.
The last thing I will say, and then we'll wrap up this recruiting talk. I don't know if you guys recall, a year ago, the McDonald's All-American game, far and away the best player in the game, not far and away, but the guy who won the MVP was Nasir Little of North Carolina. who looked like an absolute world beater and was the leading scorer in the game. RJ Barrett was the second leading scorer. Zion Williamson had a pretty pedestrian game. And based on what we saw there, and actually, and the other thing was, I don't know if you guys recall this, I was raving about Cam Reddish and what a great ball handler he was, and how it looked like I actually thought that Cam Reddish was going to play a lot of point guard for Duke this year when Trey Jones was resting and stuff like that. It just shows you how little we actually know about what these guys will be once they actually get on campus and start playing versus what they are in these all-star game situations. Yes, RJ Barrett was a scorer and turned out to be a scorer, but there was no way you could tell at this game a year ago that Zion Williamson would turn into, one of the all-time greats, or that, Nasir Little and Cam Reddish would have disappointing seasons that saw their stock go from being top 3 picks down to the bottom of the lottery, perhaps. So, why did I bother to go? All right, folks, so it's parting shot time. And by the way, something we teased at the start that we didn't get to is we're going to have a long conversation here about one and done. And every Duke fan is sort of talking about and thinking about this theory of, is it a mistake to have all these freshmen and rely on them too much? And, we're not going to get into that. We'd hope to have that conversation. We're going to put it off probably for a week or two. We will be discussing it, but we're just running really long, and we want to wrap things up at a reasonable pace. And this podcast is getting to be a long one. So, Sam, I will go to you first for a parting shot. Don't talk about one and done. Tell me what it is you want to wrap up the regular season podcast with.
Well, let's say that in my case, it's the 2 and done, which is the grad school plan that I'm on right now. I want to talk about just briefly how cool it was this season to be back on campus and experiencing Duke basketball, like not just with you guys over the internet as I have for the last 5 years, but also sort of every day when I went to school and saw my friends and got to go to all the games. It was a really special experience getting to see this Duke team live. The dozen or so, 15 times that I got to see them. They were obviously very talented. They were a lot of fun to watch. And even though I did a lot of griping about the grad student ushers this season, it was still a ton of fun to be at Duke and in Cameron for all these games. So just wanted to echo, I think, a lot of the sentiment that I've been sharing throughout the season, and that you guys got to experience the couple times that you came to games, just how awesome it is being at Duke and getting to go to these games. It really is a special event. Anytime you get to go see a game in Cameron.
I was really envious of you all season long that you got to relive what we all went through in college, at least for a little while, that you're down there in Durham as a grad student. So I'm glad you enjoyed your first year, and I'm glad that I was able to join you in the stands for 3 or 4 games. It was a lot of fun.
And Donald, I'll definitely see you again next year, guys. We're definitely going to do the live show next year. I know
for sure.
We talked about it. We said we were going to do it this year. It never came together. I've got a much better handle on how things work around here now, and I will definitely make it happen next season. So stay tuned for when the basketball schedule comes out in the fall, and we'll commit better to picking a date. Does that work, Jason?
Absolutely, and I look forward to it. Donald, your turn. What you got for me for a parting shot?
So I talked about it a little bit at the top of the show. Obviously, the games were here. The Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games were here in DC. And I just want to talk to you guys. And I know, Sam, you're from here, so you know exactly what I'm about to talk about. But this town for, 72 hours was a Duke city. And it was so, so awesome for this place to be a Duke city for once. Those of you guys out there who don't realize what DC is, everybody who lives in DC somehow hates Duke, whether they be a team, whether they go to Maryland or they're a Virginia Tech alum or Virginia alum or an alum of some other school. Everybody ends up here in Washington, DC, and everyone ends up hating us. And walking around town in Duke gear is not the easiest thing to do here in DC. But for 72 hours, I was surrounded by nothing but Duke blue, and I loved every second of it. It was like I'm celebrating my 15-year reunion in 2 weeks. So Sam,
See you there.
I'll be back on campus. But it's awesome because I got to do that this weekend. There were so many people that I knew that came into town for the games, whether they came into town from, the West Coast, the East Coast, from down south or up north. Even if they didn't have tickets, they came to be a part of this Duke family. The Crimson pregame party that we had on Friday, which was just before the game started, probably had 200 people there, and there were definitely at least 25 people there that did not have tickets. They were just there to take in the atmosphere with fellow Dukies and to be surrounded by those Duke Blue Devils that we all know and love. So that was a lot of fun to see. It was a warming sight. Sam, I'm glad you got to come up and experience it with your dad. I'm glad other, friends of mine that I hadn't seen in years were able to come down and get into at least one or both of the games. So for all of you who came to DC, from someone who lives here in DC and has to deal with the torment from other fan bases 363 days a year, I'm glad that for at least 2.5 days, 3 days, that this city was ours. And let's do it again soon, whether it be in Durham, whether it be here in DC, when the ACC tournament is here in a couple of years, or wherever we decide to take over. Because when Duke takes over, we take over. And you guys showed out. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, I've probably seen Duke play in the NCAA tournament like 10 or 12 times in my life. And the game on Sunday, unfortunately, the game we lost, the game on Sunday was the first time I think I've been to a Duke NCAA tournament game where Duke fans made up the majority of the arena. So, and especially jarring to have it in Washington, where, Donald, as you noted, there are not normally a lot of Duke fans at the games. Mm-hmm. So that was a pretty cool experience. Normally if you see Duke in the state of North Carolina, it's going to be all Carolina fans. When I went to the championship in 2015, it was predominantly Wisconsin fans. There were almost as many Kentucky fans who were just sort of hanging around Indianapolis and going to the game as there were Duke fans at that game. So this was a cool, different, exciting experience.
All right, guys. So for my parting shot, I'm going to do a little history lesson with y'all. The decade of the tens is over. This is 2019. We're done with the decade. And so it's time to anoint the best team of the decade of the tens. And I'm going to put in my vote for the Duke Blue Devils. Not a surprise, but the numbers really back me up. And I want, it's impossible at a moment like this not to be frustrated. We feel like, we had a team that should have won a national title. We were blessed with Zion Williamson, who, I'll go ahead and say it, the greatest freshman in college basketball history. Sounds like hyperbole. Sounds crazy. Do either of you disagree with me? Probably not. Zion Williamson, greatest freshman in college basketball history. That's what we had on our team, and we feel like we were cheated. And so it's hard to have a good feeling about it, but I want to recap this decade because I think folks will feel pretty good when they hear what this decade meant. Obviously, there were 2 national titles, but think about this. Duke was either the national champion or number 1 in the land, considered the best team in the country 7 out of the 10 years of this decade. 2010, we won the national title. 2011, we had Kyrie Irving, and everyone remembers how great we were early in the year that year. 2013, Mason, Seth, and Ryan's senior year. We started the season barely in the top 10. That team was undefeated through early January. We were number 1 in the polls, and Mason was having a stud senior year. We eventually lost to Louisville in the Elite Eight, but in 2013, everyone thought for a while that Duke was the best team in the land. 2015, we win a national title. Actually, an irony about 2015, that team was never once ranked number 1 because Kentucky was number 1 all year long. But we were the best at the end. We won a national title. 2017.
And the DBR podcast debuted.
Amen.
So made it an even better season.
That was pretty cool.
2017, Harry Giles never really got healthy, but Tatum was great. Luke Kennard exploded. That was the year that we started out preseason number 1, and we stayed number 1 for quite a while. And we eventually went on to have 4 wins in 4 days, something that's never been done before, to win an ACC title. 2018 last year.
And Grayson Allen tripped a bunch of guys. for some
Yeah,
reason.
I left that out, but yes.
Well,
28
you gotta look, you gotta get a fair accounting of everything that went on.
I hear you.
You
You're
gotta have a
right.
well-balanced meal.
In my notes, it said the season of Allen's tripping. I didn't say it, but that was in my notes. 2018 last year. I mean, look, Marvin Bagley, who was, arguably the greatest freshman at Duke until Zion Williamson stepped on campus. Wendell Carter. We spent the entire season pretty much in the top 5, lost in the Elite 8 to Kansas when Grayson's shot hit 57 different parts of the rim and then didn't fall down. But clearly Duke was one of the teams that was considered the national title favorite then. And then this year we were number 1 basically all season long. And we had Zion's magic this year. So again, 7 of the 10 years of the decade, Duke was at some point number 1 or the national title winner. We had 2 national titles during the decade, 3 Elite 8s, 2 Sweet 16s. We made the NCAA tournament every single time. So I want to go back to where I started with, were we the best team of the decade? I mean, the other contenders, you'll find out, really aren't that much a contender. UConn is the only other team that won 2 national titles this decade. They only made the tourney 4 times. They were never a number 1 seed. They happened to catch lightning in a bottle twice, and UConn won 2 national titles. But, I mean, if you only make the tournament 4 out of the 10 years of the decade, you're not the team of the decade. UNC won a national title. They reached a Final Four. They had 2 Elite 8s.
Didn't they have 2 Final Fours?
Well, plus, national title and the Final Four.
Right, sure.
Yeah. So that's a total of 2. But they missed the tourney completely in 2010. Remember, they played in the NIT that year.
I do.
8250.
I do remember that.
That's somewhat disqualifying. And only having 1 national title, only 2 Elite 8s to our 2 national titles and 3 Elite 8s. I think Duke has the edge there. Villanova is the other.
Let me keep poking holes in all of Jason's optimism here. We moved the goalpost by 1 year, and UNC's got arguably the best team of the last 11 years. So. Other than that,
but that was a different decade. So
exactly.
Decade,
so
we don't make the rules on decades.
Look, we didn't write these rules like the Romans did or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's real simple. 2009 does not count as part of the 2010s. So Villanova also won 2 national titles. Again, Duke, Villanova, UConn, 3 teams to win 2 natties. But other than those 2 national titles, Villanova didn't even reach another Elite 8. And they had 1 season where they were 13 and 19. I mean, again, I feel that's somewhat disqualifying when you have other teams that did the same things they did and more. So the other competition, it's really Duke and Kentucky. Duke has 2 national titles. Kentucky had 1. Duke had only 2 Final Fours, the 2 years we won those national titles. Kentucky had 3 other Final Fours. So they made 4 Final Fours this decade. Both teams had 3 Elite 8s. But the reason I think Duke gets the edge, not only that we have more national titles, but do you remember Kentucky completely missed the tournament 1 year, and they lost in the first round of the NIT
to Robert Morris on the road because they gave up their home game for a concert.
Nice. So in my unbiased opinion, Duke's 2 national titles, 3 Elite 8s, 2 Sweet 16s, and making the tourney every single year gives us the edge as the top team of the decade. And that's my final answer.
I appreciate this analysis. If Michigan State wins the national championship next week, they would be in contention there, because I think they've made 3 or 4 Final Fours in this decade and have been obviously, right at the top of college basketball basically every season. They've obviously lost to Duke more than they've won, but Michigan State was another good one. I know Syracuse has fluked their way into a couple of Final Fours in this decade, so that's cool. Gonzaga obviously broke through for the first time, and has been sort of an elite team all the way through. But Michigan made it to 2 national championship games, never won any of them. Although in 2013 they are officially the team that came the closest to winning the national championship. So you have to respect that. There've obviously been a number of teams that have sort of reached either the peak or very near the peak in this time. Those Wisconsin teams in the middle of the decade were obviously really good, but for sustained getting into the tournament, being a top seed, I think Duke's lowest seed during that whole run was a number 4. Duke never lower than a number 4, going all the way back to being a 6 in 2007. So even though I think that it's fewer deep tournament runs than Duke fans had gotten used to, maybe in the 80s and 90s, still a very successful program, especially when you look around at college basketball and how often teams are changing. And Jason, it was interesting that you mentioned Kentucky. Did you guys see the news today that John Calipari is now the
coach for life,
owner of a lifetime contract with the University of Kentucky? So
that's no April Fool either. That actually
it wasn't an April Fool. They just went and did it.
Yeah.
Right after he missed the Final Four by losing to a rival. So whatever, got to do what you got to do.
And I will add to close this out. You just talked about all those stats, all these teams we mentioned, right? I think that shows you how difficult it is to win a national championship. People, the haters will let you know, especially today, they'll let you know that this season was a failure because Duke didn't win. And now we could be disappointed and frustrated that we didn't win the national championship, but this just shows you how hard it is to actually win one. You have to have a lot of things come together at the right possible time. And after all that happens, you still have to have a little bit of luck. And sometimes you don't have it. But if you think about all those teams that we're talking about, the Michigan States, the Kentuckys, the Villanovas, they've had, every year they are considered a good program, and they didn't make the title game every year. They didn't win a championship every year. They didn't even make the tournament some years. But for us, that sustained level of excellence that we've had, not just this decade, but in the 4 decades that we've had where, a guy by the name of Mike Krzyzewski was head coach, that just shows you how difficult it is to win a national championship and to be successful year in and year out, and why Coach K is the greatest coach we have ever seen.
Well, I can think of no more fitting, better way to wrap up this podcast than with those words. Donald, thank you very much for saying that. Sam, thanks for chiming in as well. That's going to wrap it up for us here on episode 157 of the DBR podcast. We know it was a long one. Thanks for sticking with us all the way to the end. Just because the Blue Devils season is over, our season of bringing you content, whatever you want to call this stuff, does not end. We will be back in the very near future, probably in a week or so, to talk about things going on in the world of college basketball, things going on that affect the Duke Blue Devils. By the way, we desperately want to do a mailbag show. We want you guys to email us. Please write to us at dbrpodcast@gmail.com. If you do, and we read it on the air, then you'll be famous.
Or something.
Yeah, something like that. So reach out to us, please. If you've got a comment on the season, if you have a question you want to ask us, we want to hear from you. Again, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. For Sam and Donald, I am Jason. Again, thanks to all of you for joining us. And thanks to the Duke Blue Devils for having a great, great season. I know it's a disappointment that we didn't make it as far as we wanted to, but oh my gosh, what a wonderful, wonderful ride it was. One of the most enjoyable seasons to watch ever in Duke history. And we close it out by having the Duke Band once again play us home.
The golden age of travel is back in the Palm Beaches. As America's first resort destination, the Palm Beaches are the gentler side of Florida, waiting just for you. From Jupiter to Boca Raton, sun-kissed sands embrace the warm Gulf Stream waters. Our vibrant blend of people, cultures, and coastal towns welcome everyone. So we invite you to join us. Experience the original, the one, the only, the Palm Beaches. Plan your trip at thepalmbeaches.com.